Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
In this class, we are going to begin with the second poem of Class 8 Alternative English Nagaland 4, which is Geography Lesson. Now, this poem written by Zulfikar Ghosh is about all the perceptions that the poet had about his city prior to flying in the air. Okay. He was very doubtful about a lot of things, about a lot of developments that took place in his city. He did not know about a lot of things which take place in the world as a whole. But the moment he flew into the sky, he got all the answers that he needed. But still there was one answer that he could not find no matter how he tried. And what was that answer? We are going to read it when we read the poem. So let us begin with this poem written by Zulfikar Ghosh. So, can you imagine what your city looks like if you would see it from, a height of 10,000 feet above the ground? You will see that your city is very well planned. It is perfect with respect to everything, be it its shape or anything that you would come across, right? So the poet, as I told you through this poem, is describing such a view of the city and some questions that he had in his mind. So when the jet sprang into the sky, it was clear why the city had developed the way it had. Seeing its scale 6 inches to the mile, there seemed an inevitability about what on ground had looked haphazard, unplanned and without style, when the jet sprang into the sky. So the poet says that when his jet sprang into the sky means when his jet flew into the sky, it was clear to him why the city had developed the way it had. So when you are living in a city, let us consider ourselves. So we live in this city, we go on, we go out of our houses and we see our city to be very underdeveloped. We see that the city is very unplanned. We see it very untidy, very unkempt. But only when we see an overview of the entire area would we understand that looking at something from a closer perspective is different, but looking at something from a broader perspective is always different. So this is something which is very important. Very general. You might look at some problem from only your point of view. The solution to it would be different. But if you look at that problem from a wider point of view, a broader point of view, the answer to that would be altogether different. So here the poet says that when his jet sprang into the sky, when he flew into the sky, it was clear why the city had developed the way it had. He understood the reason or the way his city was developed. Seeing its scale 6 inches to the mile. So seeing its scale 6 inches to the mile means when his jet scaled, it covered a distance of 6 inches to 1 mile. So just from a height of 1 mile, he could see a better outlook of his entire city. There seemed an inevitability about what on ground had looked haphazard. Inevitability means something which is unavoidable. So, looking at his city was now clear to him that why The same city which looked so haphazard to me, it looked so unplanned to me. Haphazard means very untidy, very unkempt, very unorderly and unorganized. So he felt that the same city which looked so unorganized and which looked so untidy and unplanned to me, that looked so much without style to me, now I understood that it was highly unavoidable. Being at the ground and looking at the city in that way is quite obvious. But only when my jet sprang into the sky could I understand the way the entire city had developed. Now, if you have noticed, the first line and the last line of this stanza has been repeated. When a line is repeated twice, so this poetic device is known as refrain. So refrain is a poetic device in which a line is repeated more than once, and repetition, that I had mistakenly written, is that poetic device in which a word is repeated more than once. Okay? So here, since the first line is repeated twice, therefore we are talking about refrain as the poetic device. And the reason why we use refrain in a poem is because it highlights something very important. It brings forth something which is very, essential with respect to the entire theme of the poem. And why was it necessary to use refrain here? Because the poet is simply wishing to highlight that he got a lot of answers about the development of his city when his jet was in the sky, when he was at a height from which he could view the sky, his city. Let us move to the next stanza. When the jet reached 10,000 feet, so first it was from a mile that he was noticing his city. Now the jet had reached a height of 10,000 feet. So it was clear why the country had cities where the rivers ran and why the valleys were populated. So he got two more answers. The first, the cities, the areas where there were rivers, they had cities around them. So people had got themselves situated. The people had started living in those areas where there were rivers around. And the valleys, not the mountains, but the valleys, the flat regions were more populated. The logic of geography says that land and water attracted men was clearly delineated when the jet reached 10,000. So he says that the logic of geography, this is the logic of geography. And what is the logic of geography that we are talking about? That the land and water attracted man. Man always went to those places where there was water and where there was flat area. And this logic of geography was clearly delineated. He understood this logic of geography only when his jet reached the height of 10,000. So now, again, the first and the last line has been repeated. Why? Because the poet wishes the readers to know that this clarity about the logic of geography, that river, around the river, the city, the people lived, and that the valleys were more populated. So this logic of geography was clear to the poet only when his jet reached a height of 10,000. Now let us move on to the next stanza. When the jet rose 6 miles high, so now it is 6 miles high, it was clear the earth was round and it had more sea than land. So now at a height of 6 miles, he got to understand that the earth was actually round and that it had more sea, it had more water on it as compared to land. But it was difficult to understand that the men on the earth found causes to hate each other, to build walls across cities and to kill. From that height, it was not clear why. But it was difficult to understand. Now comes the problem that the poet faced. So far, all the things were clear to him. We read in the first stanza that it was clear to him from a height of 1 mile that the same city, which seemed to be very unplanned, very haphazard, unorderly, he understood how perfectly its architecture was made, how wonderfully it was built. Then, when his jet reached a height of 10,000 feet, he understood the logic of geography. He understood that men always preferred to live in areas where there were rivers nearby and the areas which were flat, which were plains. When his plane reached a height of 6 miles, he understood that the earth was round and that there was more water on earth than land. But there was a difficulty that he faced. He was not able to understand that the men on the earth found causes to hate each other. So he did not understand the reason from that height as well, that why did the men living on earth find it so difficult to live cordially with each other, to live with love and affection with each other? Why do they hate each other? Why do they build walls across cities? Why did they build walls? Why did they discriminate among themselves? And why did they kill each other out of hatred? So these three questions he could not get the answer to from that height as well. So although he got an answer to all the questions, but the three questions that he could not get an answer to even from that height was why the men on earth found it so difficult to live cordially with each other. Why did they always build walls among themselves? Why did they discriminate among themselves? And why did they kill each other? So this question was not very easy for the poet to find an answer to. So, my dear students, in this home geography lesson, what did Zulfikar Ghosh talk about? He first talks about the way he got an answer related to his cities when he started flying higher in the sky. From a height of 1 mile, he could see how wonderfully planned his city looked. The same city which, when he looked closely, he found it to be very haphazard, he found it to be very unorganized and unorderly. But now he could understand why it, from that height, that how organized and how neat it was. Then, from the height of 10,000 feet, he understood the reason why these men preferred to live near those areas which had rivers, which had valley around it. Then he also understood from a height of 6 miles that the earth was round and that it had more sea than land. But the thing that was not clear to him was why the men hated each other, why did they kill each other, and why did they build walls between each other. So with this, my dear students, we come to the end of the explanation of the poem. Let us move on to the discussion of the back exercises. Find 3 or 4 phrases in stanza 1 and 2 which are likely to occur in the geography lesson. So from the first and the second stanza, we have to pick up those phrases which you can come across in your geography lesson when you are actually reading a geography book, the things that you are going to come across. So I would just comment on the logic of geography. Cities where rivers ran and the valleys were populated, and that land and water attracted men. So these 4 phrases, according to me, are to be found by anyone when reading geography. Seen from the window of an aeroplane, the city appears. How did the city appear to be when we saw it from the aeroplane? As developed as necessary. Found it to be developed. Which of the following statements are examples of the logic of geography? So, what statements out of these talk about the logic of geography? There are cities where there are rivers. Yes, this is the logic of geography. City appear as they are not from 6 miles above the ground. Is this taught in the geography that when you move higher from 6 inches to 6 miles, the city will seem to be different? The geography lesson does not teach us that. It is easy to understand why valleys are populated. So yes, geography lessons do teach us why valleys are populated. It is difficult to understand why humans hate and kill each other. Does geography teach this to us in any form? No, it doesn't. The earth is round and it has more sea than land. Indeed, it teaches us. Mention 2 things that are clear from the height. So what was clear to the poet from the height? It was clear to the poet that the city was just as developed as it should be, that people preferred to live in areas which had river, which had valleys. The earth was round, it had more sea than land. But something that was not clear from that height was, why did people hate each other? Why did they kill each other? And why did they discriminate and build walls among each other? So, yes, with this, my dear students, we come to the end of this poem.